the king of whispering stone. They say the air in the Cambodian jungle has a memory, that it holds the last breath of empires, the scent of phantom incense, the sweat of a million forgotten prayers. I used to think that was just poetry, something tour guides told foreigners to make the stones seem more alive. But after what happened at Khmer, the bridge of the stone dragon king, I know the truth. The air doesn't just remember, it waits. My name is Rith, and my work is a love affair with ghosts. Not the kind that rattle chains, but the ghosts of history etched in laterite and sandstone. I'm a surveyor, part of a team documenting undocumented ruins lost in the provinces beyond Angkor. It's a quiet job, a lonely one. It's mostly just me, my GPS unit, a camera, and the deafening, hypnotic drone of the cicadas. That sound for me was the sound of Cambodia itself. The rhythm of the heat, the pulse of the deep, green earth. I never imagined what it would mean to hear it stop. The bridge wasn't on any of our official maps. I found it by following a dry riverbed, a rumor I'd heard from an old man in a village miles away who spoke of a place where the stone gods still slept. It took half a day of hacking through vines that clung like desperate hands and wading through knee-deep mud that smelled of decay and life all at once. And then, the jungle simply opened, as if holding its breath. There it was, Khmer. It was magnificent and utterly broken. A colossal arch of dark, weathered stone spanning a chasm that was now just a tangle of roots and shadow. The causeway leading to it was lined with devas and asuras, their faces so eroded by centuries of monsoon rain that their smiles and snarls were almost identical. A seven-headed Naga balustrade, the mythical serpent king, formed the railing. Its stone scales were coated in a velvet of green moss, its fangs chipped, its regal posture slumped, as if weary of its long vigil. The air, thick as wet silk, clung to me as I ran a hand over the crumbling Naga. The stone was warm, holding the day's oppressive heat like a fever. I felt a strange sense of trespass, of walking into a room where someone had only just left. I spent the next hour working, taking measurements, photographing the reliefs, documenting the subsidence that threatened to finally pull the whole structure down into the earth. The sun began to dip, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple, filtering through the canopy in dusty, sacred shafts of light. It was time to go. As I packed my gear, my eye caught something. On the face of a smiling deva, a celestial maiden, a small piece of her ornate headdress had broken away. It was a tiny stone, no bigger than my thumb, slick with moss and perfectly shaped. I knew the rules. You don't touch, you don't take. You document and you leave things as you found them. But this was different. It was already detached, lying loose in a small crevice of her cheek like a stone tear. A minor theft against a forgotten king, I thought. A secret between me and this lost place. I picked it up. It felt strangely cool in my palm, a stark contrast to the humid air. Without a second thought, I pocketed the small, moss-slick stone, a keepsake. Instantly, the world fell silent. It wasn't a gradual quiet. It was a sudden, violent amputation of sound. The deafening chorus of a million cicadas, the constant, overwhelming soundtrack to my life here, ceased. One moment it was a wall of noise. The next, nothing. The birds, the rustle of leaves, the hum of insects, all gone. It was a profound and listening silence, a vacuum so absolute that I could hear the blood thumping in my own ears. The jungle was no longer a living thing. It was a witness. A low, grinding groan vibrated up from the bridge's foundations, through the soles of my boots and into my bones. It was the sound of immense weight shifting after a 1,000-year slumber, the sound of a tombstone being dragged across a granite floor. I froze, my hand clutching the strap of my bag, my heart a frantic bird trapped in my chest. I looked along the causeway at the stone gods lining the path. The shadows cast by those ancient statues did not just deepen as the last light failed, they began to move. They stretched, uncoiling from the bases of the stone figures like black smoke. They bled across the laterite blocks, flowing towards each other, coalescing. They began to rise, pulling themselves up from the ground, no longer two-dimensional things but something with depth, with presence. They merged into a single, towering form that blotted out the last of the dying sun, and then the rising moon. I didn't scream. My throat had closed, filled with a cold, hard knot of terror. I was staring at a silhouette of impossible height, a creature made of pure absence of living shadow. And from the center of that void, I felt more than saw a gaze. The ancient, patient gaze of something that had been waiting for a fool like me for a very, very long time. My legs finally remembered how to work. I ran. I didn't look back. I crashed through the undergrowth, thorns tearing at my skin, vines whipping my face, but I didn't feel it. The only sensation was the thundering of my own heart and the dead, unnatural silence of the jungle behind me. The grinding sound wasn't there anymore, but I knew with a certainty that was colder than any fear I had ever known that I was being followed. The silence was chasing me. And in my pocket, the small stone from the Deva's face felt as heavy as a gravestone and as cold as the bottom of a well. I must have looked like a madman when I finally stumbled out of the jungle and onto the dirt road where I'd left my moto. I was covered in mud and bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. I drove back to Siem Reap in a fugue state, the familiar hum of the engine, a desperate comfort against the memory of that absolute silence. Back in my small room at the guest house, I locked the door, bolted the wooden shutters, and leaned against the wall, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. I emptied my pockets onto the bed, keys, wallet, a crumpled map, and the small grey stone. In the dim light of the single bulb it looked unremarkable, just a piece of rock. But when I touched it, an icy chill shot up my arm. It wasn't just cold, it was a dead cold, a deep earth cold that seemed to suck the warmth right out of my skin. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. I tried to rationalize it. I was dehydrated, exhausted. I'd been alone in the jungle too long. My mind was playing tricks on me. The cicadas had probably just stopped their cycle for a moment. The grinding was the bridge settling. The shadow was a trick of the fading light, my own fear projected onto the ancient stones. It had to be. I took a shower, letting the lukewarm water wash away the dirt and, I hoped, the dread. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave. I felt it on the back of my neck, a prickling sensation like 1,000 tiny needles. Every time I glanced at the mirror, I expected to see something standing behind me in the steam. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it lazily stirred the thick, humid air. And then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound from outside my window, a soft, scraping noise, a grinding, like stone being slowly, deliberately dragged across stone. I sat bolt upright, my blood turning to ice. I listened, straining my ears. It was there, just at the edge of hearing. SCRR up, GRR rind, SCRR up, GRR rind. It was the sound from the bridge. I crept to the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. I parted the wooden slats of the shutter by a millimeter and peered out into the guest house's small, moonlit courtyard. The courtyard was empty. A few potted palms, a stone lantern, the owner's sleeping dog curled up near the gate. Nothing. The sound had stopped. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It was my imagination. It had to be. I was scaring myself. I turned from the window, and my gaze fell on the bedside table where I had left the stone. The shadow cast by the stone in the dim lamplight was wrong. It was too long, too dark. It stretched across the table and up the wall, a deep, inky black finger pointing towards my bed. As I watched, paralyzed, the shadow seemed to twitch, to flex, as if it were a living thing. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner of the room with the light on, my eyes fixed on that small, innocuous piece of rock and its monstrous, impossible shadow. The grinding sound didn't return, but I didn't need it to. The terror was now inside the room with me. I had not left the bridge's guardian behind. I had invited it in. By morning, I was a wreck. The guest house owner, an elderly woman with kind, wrinkled eyes whom everyone called Lok Yi, took one look at me over breakfast and frowned. "Bong Rith," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you look like you have seen a ghost." I tried to laugh it off, blaming the heat, a bad night's sleep, but my smile felt like a cracked mask. I couldn't eat. The plate of bai sach krauk, my favorite pork and rice breakfast, sat untouched. The smell of it made me nauseous. Lok Yi sat down opposite me, her gaze steady and knowing. "Your spirit is not well," she said simply. "Something is heavy on you. Where did you go yesterday?" My carefully constructed wall of denial crumbled. I needed to tell someone. I needed someone to tell me I was crazy. In a low, halting voice, I told her everything. About the forgotten bridge, the crumbling Devas, the sudden, terrifying silence. And my voice barely a whisper, I told her about the stone. When I finished, she didn't call me a fool. She didn't laugh. She just sighed, a deep, weary sound. She looked older suddenly. Her eyes held a sorrow that seemed as ancient as the temples themselves. "Spian th more nakariach," she murmured, the name a prayer and a warning. "The old people know this place. It is not for us anymore. It belongs to the Arak, the guardian." "The Arak?" I asked, my mouth dry. "Every sacred place has a guardian, Bong," she explained, her voice low. "A spirit bound to protect it. The Arak of a place like that bridge is very old, very powerful. They are made of the belief of the people who built it, of the blessings of the monks of the Barami, the spiritual power that soaks into the stones over 1,000 years. They are not good or evil. They simply are. They are the keepers. Their duty is their entire existence. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into mine. When you took that stone, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, you did not just steal a piece of rock. You stole a piece of the Deva's face, a piece of the bridge's soul. You stole a piece of the Arak itself. You have broken the balance. You have woken it from its long sleep, and it is angry. The blood drained from my face. What is it? What did I see? You saw its form, she said, its anger given shape. It is the weight of the stone, the memory of the river, the watchfulness of the gods. It does not have a body of flesh, but of shadow and power, and it will not rest until it reclaims what is its own. She paused, her gaze drifting towards my room. And it will take more than just the stone, Bong Rith. A debt like this is paid with a life. It believes you owe it a part of yourself. A cold dread so profound it felt like a physical weight settled in my stomach. The grinding sound, the moving shadow, it was real. What can I do? I pleaded. I'll take it back. I'll put it back right now. Lok Yi shook her head slowly. It is not so simple. You cannot just walk back and apologize. You have shown disrespect. The path back to the bridge is now its domain. It will not make it easy for you. It will test you. It will try to break you before you even arrive. She stood up and went to a small shrine in the corner of the main room, a place with offerings of fruit, jasmine garlands, and gently smoking incense sticks. She prayed for a moment, then returned with a small woven krama, a traditional Cambodian scarf, and a string of sandalwood beads. Take this, she said, wrapping the krama around my wrist and placing the prayer beads in my hand. It is not much, but the scent of the incense, the prayers of your ancestors, they may offer some small protection. It will shield your spirit, if only a little. You must go back tonight. During the day its power is rooted in the bridge, but at night its shadow can walk further. You must return the stone before the next sunset. Put it back exactly where you found it. Pray for forgiveness. Beg for it. And whatever you do, she looked at me with an intensity that chilled me to my core, do not let it touch you. If its shadow falls on you completely, it will claim a part of you forever. Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. There was no more room for doubt, no more space for rationalization. I was being haunted by something ancient and implacable, and my only hope was to walk back into the heart of my own nightmare. That afternoon was the longest of my life. I stayed in my room, the stone sitting on the table, a silent accusation. I could feel its presence, a cold spot in the warm air. The shadow it cast seemed to pulse faintly with the beat of my own terrified heart. I tried to prepare for the journey back, but my mind was a storm of fear. Lok Yi's words echoed in my head, it will try to break you. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in bruised colors, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I wrapped the stone carefully in a small cloth, put it in my pack, and held the sandalwood beads Lok Yi had given me. Their smooth, fragrant surface was a small comfort. The ride back to the edge of the jungle was surreal. The familiar roads of Siem Reap, bustling with tuk-tuks and tourists, felt like a world away, a life I no longer belonged to. I was an outcast, marked by a spectral curse. When I reached the dirt track and parked my moto, the sun had fully set. The jungle before me was a wall of blackness, utterly silent. No cicadas, no night birds. It was waiting for me. My flashlight beam cut a nervous, trembling tunnel into the oppressive dark. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sounded like a footstep behind me. The air grew colder, heavier. The familiar path I had taken just the day before was now a disorienting labyrinth. Vines seemed to reach for me like grasping fingers, and the shadows between the trees were not empty. They were deep, watching voids. I began to hear whispers, faint at first like the sigh of the wind, but there was no wind. They were in a language I didn't recognize, ancient and sibilant. The whispers coiled around me, slithering into my ears, saying my name. Rith, Rith. I pushed on, my breath misting in the cold air, chanting a prayer my mother had taught me as a child. The words felt hollow, weak against the suffocating presence that was growing around me. Then I heard the grinding. It was closer this time, louder, to my left than my right. It was circling me. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the trees. I saw nothing but ancient trunks and hanging lianas, but the sound was there. Grrrind scrr up, the sound of a mountain walking. Panic seized me. I started to run, stumbling blindly through the undergrowth. The whispers grew louder, turning into mocking laughter that echoed from all directions. I felt a crushing weight on my chest, as if the air itself was trying to suffocate me. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into absolute darkness. I fell, my face hitting the damp earth. I lay there gasping, my mind screaming. This was it. This was how it would end. I was lost, blind, and being hunted. Lok Yi's warning rang in my ears, "It will try to break you." Then I remembered the beads in my hand. I clutched them tight, the sandalwood sharp and real against my skin. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I would not die here. I would not let it win. I forced myself to my feet. I couldn't see, but I could feel. I could feel the direction of the bridge. It was like a cold magnet pulling me, drawing me in. I began to walk, one hand outstretched, feeling my way through the darkness. The grinding sound was all around me now, a constant, terrifying percussion. I could feel the vibrations in the ground. I knew it was close. I could smell it now too. A scent of old, wet stone, of deep moss, and something else, something like ozone, the smell of immense power. After what felt like an eternity, my outstretched hand touched something solid, rough and cold. Carved stone. I had reached the causeway. The moon broke through the clouds, casting the scene in a sickly, ethereal light, and I saw it. It was standing at the entrance to the bridge, waiting. It was no longer just a silhouette. It was a horrifying collage, a nightmare of Khmer architecture brought to life. It was 10 meters tall, its body a shifting, grinding amalgamation of the statues from the causeway. I could see a Deva's serene smile on a torso made of a snarling Asura's chest. Its arms were the long, scaled bodies of Naga serpents, and its legs were the thick, carved pillars from the temple gate. Its form was constantly in motion, stone surfaces grating against each other, pieces reconfiguring, held together by the pure, black energy of shadow. And in the center of its shifting head, where a face should have been, were 2 empty sockets of absolute darkness that stared right through me. This was the Arak, the king of whispering stone, the guardian in its full, terrible glory. It didn't move towards me. It just stood there, a silent mountain of divine rage. The grinding sound I had been hearing was the sound of its own body, its very existence. It raised one of its Naga arms and pointed a stone finger directly at me. It wasn't a threat, it was a judgment. My legs were frozen, my body locked in a primal terror I never knew was possible. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I knew there was no escape. The only way was forward. Clutching my pack, I took a step onto the causeway. The Arak didn't move, I took another. The air grew so cold it burned my lungs. I felt a pressure building in my head, a psychic weight that threatened to crush my mind. The whispers were a roar now, the angry voices of 1,000 forgotten spirits, all of them screaming at me for my sacrilege. I was halfway across the causeway when it finally moved. It didn't walk. It glided, the stone at its base flowing like liquid shadow across the bridge. It was impossibly fast. In a heartbeat it was towering over me, its immense shadow falling upon me, a blanket of absolute cold and despair. I remembered Lok Yi's final warning, "Do not let it touch you." I fell to my knees, fumbling with the clasp on my pack. My fingers were numb, clumsy with fear. The creature loomed, its shadow consuming me. I could feel my strength, my will, my very life force being siphoned away, drawn into its dark form. I pulled out the small, cloth-wrapped stone. It was so cold it felt like dry ice, burning my skin. I looked from the stone in my hand to the face of the Deva on the causeway where I had taken it from. It was just a few feet away. I had to put it back. I crawled, dragging myself across the last few feet of stone. The Arak's presence was a physical force, pressing down, trying to flatten me, to absorb me into the stone of the bridge itself. I felt my bones creak, my mind starting to fray. I saw flashes of things, the bridge being built by men in loincloths, processions of saffron-robed monks, the violence of forgotten wars. 1,000 years of memory, of duty, crashing down on me. With the last of my strength, I reached up to the Deva's smiling face. I saw the small crevice on her cheek, a dark wound. My hand was shaking violently. The Arak let out a low, grinding groan, a sound of pure fury, and its shadow hand began to descend. I pushed the stone into the crevice. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft, golden light pulsed from the stone just for a second. The crushing pressure vanished. The deafening whispers stopped. The Arak froze, its descending hand inches from my head. There was a sound like a great, deep exhalation of breath, a sigh that seemed to come from the earth itself. The creature shuddered. The shadows holding it together began to unravel. The pieces of the statues that formed its body began to separate, drifting apart like smoke. The grinding sound softened, slowed, and then stopped. The Naga arms, the Asura torso, the Deva face, they all dissolved, flowing back towards their stone counterparts along the causeway, sinking back into the statues from which they had been born. In seconds, it was over. The towering monster was gone. All that remained were the silent, sleeping stone gods lining the bridge, looking exactly as they had for 1,000 years. The profound silence remained for a moment longer, and then, tentatively at first, a single cicada began its song. Then another and another, until the jungle was once again filled with its familiar, life-affirming chorus. I lay on the cold stone of the causeway for a long time, weeping with relief and exhaustion. I had survived. I had paid my debt. I fled the bridge and never looked back. I didn't stop in Siem Reap. I went straight to Phnom Penh, booked the first flight I could find, and left Cambodia. I left my job, my research, my love affair with the stones. I couldn't bear to be near them anymore. I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. The Arak took back its stone, but the debt was not fully paid. It had marked me. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I can still hear it. A faint grinding sound, like teeth in the back of my mind. And there are moments when I'm tired, or when I look at my reflection in a dark window, that I see it. For just a split second, I'll see my own eyes, and they aren't brown anymore. They are the color of grey, weathered sandstone, with tiny hairline cracks running through them. I didn't just steal a piece of the bridge. The bridge stole a piece of me. The Arak left a shard of its stony silence inside my soul, and I know I will carry it with me until the day I die. So I am telling you this as a warning. When you walk among the old places, the sacred places, remember that you are a guest. Look, admire, but do not touch. And never, ever take what is not yours. Some souvenirs come with a price you cannot possibly imagine. Some guardians never truly sleep. And some debts can never be repaid, only carried like a cold, heavy stone in the heart for the rest of your life.